Hello everybody, it is Elagatua and we are back with the second part of our series, 10 levels of fog openers. Thanks everybody for watching the first video. Got a really good reception. I was really excited to see all the discussion and the really great comments. And I'm really excited to be recording this one. I put a lot of preparation into this one, much more than I do for normal videos where I just grab a replay and talk about it for like 2 hours. I think this is going to be one of my most organized and interesting videos that I've ever done. So this is going to be a good one, and I can't wait to get into it. In the first video in this series, we talked about 5 different levels of fog openings that were primarily about the fundamentals. Things like being efficient with your inventory, using transports, and building stuff from all your bases. Stuff that probably was not revolutionary for 80% of the people who are watching this video. Now, with these next 5 levels, we are gonna get into some stuff that is maybe new, or at least expressed in a way that is new for a lot of the viewers here. And I think most people watching this video will be able to learn a lot and be able to maybe think about their openers in a more clear way because of how I've organized some of the information in this topic. So with that being said, winning a game of Advance Wars by Web is not merely a matter of having efficient captures, because you have an opponent on the map that you're playing against, and you can have a really efficient capture route and your own ideas of what you want to do, but your opponent has a say in the matter too. Your opponent can mess things up for you, get to cities that you want to get to, harass cities that you want to capture, put things on cities to prevent you from capturing them, and otherwise disrupt all your plans. So having a really efficient capture order and having a good build order, building the things at the right times, only gets you so far. You need to account for what your opponent is going to do, and also you are going to be wanting to try and disrupt what your opponent wants to do as well. So how do you actually do that in practice? How do you set up an opener that will bring you victory against a certain CO in a certain matchup? And how can you think about what might be effective in the situation that you find yourself in for your specific games? That is what we're going to be talking about today. How to think about the rock, paper, scissors of fog, as some people have described it. And rock, paper, scissors is an analogy that I think maybe leaves a little bit much to the luck factor, because rock, paper, scissors is a game of luck. But I really do not think that openings in Advance Wars are tremendously up to luck. There's certainly some influence, but I think it's much more like poker, where you can be unlucky in certain situations, but ultimately, if you are making good decisions the majority of the time, you're going to come out ahead more often than not. And there's so many different decisions to be made in an Advance Wars by Web game that if you're making good decisions throughout the course of the game, even if some things go wrong early on, there's still lots of room to recover, assuming that you're making good decisions overall. So with that being said, let me pause this auto-scrolling that we've got going on here, and I'm going to show you an image even before we get into our discussion of the next 5 levels here that I think encompasses everything that we're going to talk about in a single kind of condensed format. I know that's a lot of hype, but maybe you'll be convinced when you actually see it. So let me pause here. Boom. Okay, we're back. So I have created this image to, I guess, demonstrate different types of openings and what is good against what broadly. Now, I've chosen to display all of these different categories of openings as a triangle because there's overlap and kind of a spectrum between all of the different types of openings. Now, first, let's talk about the 3 different main categories of openings that I've chosen to highlight here. We have aggro, which is, I've represented it with the recon at the top. We have safe openings, which I've represented with a tank. And then we have greed openings, which I have represented with a transport copter. And we will go into a lot of detail about what each of these openings are and how to play each of these openings effectively. But I want you to just kind of absorb the concepts of the rock, paper, scissors, so to speak, that's happening here. Aggro openers generally are going to come out ahead against greed openings because the harass will disrupt the early aggressive captures. Greed openings tend to win against safe openings because the greed openings can abuse the lack of vision of the safe openings, and safe openings tend to win against aggro openings because safe openings have the counterattack potential to decisively defeat any sort of harassment that comes and secure an advantage through counterattacking. So we have aggro as scissors, we have greed as paper, and we have safe as rock. And I think that's a pretty apt metaphor, for the different types of opening. It's very intuitive to understand why aggro might be scissors and greed is paper and safe is rock, right? Like that just kind of makes sense based on the characteristics of those openings. And I've put artillery in the middle because artillery is a unit that can get added to almost any type of opening, and artillery in itself is not necessarily indicative of what type of opening it is. It more depends on how you use the artillery that defines what type of opening it ends up being. That being said, artillery openings, but generally you're not just opening artillery, you're opening artillery in combination with something else. And so those openings tend to drag, I guess, the opening towards kind of the center of this chart where it's more balanced between any of the 3 openings. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing or a bad thing. You shouldn't assume that balanced is good and that openings to the extremes of this triangle are bad necessarily. Everything is going to depend on the map. It's map dependent. That's level 0, if you remember. And also your CO matchup. So it's more about, as a player, I want to target a certain type of opening and then actually hit the target with how it actually plays out. And if you can achieve the desired effect of your opening that you want to achieve, well, that's going to show that you've really mastered the game at a pretty deep level and that you're able to control what is happening in your games. And if you get to that level, well, you're 1700. So with that being said, I think we've stared at this lovely picture long enough. Let's get into the actual levels. All right. We are here on Stolen Eras, which is a map that is in the current Fog rotation, and we're in a match between Kantbei and Savage the Beasts, 2 pretty strong Fog players. We've got Kantbei as Hawk, and we have Savage the Beasts as Sturm, and we're going to use this as our first replay for level 6. So level 6, here we go. In safe openers, use vehicles to defend captures that are most contested. So the object of a safe opener is that you are prepared to receive harassment and counterattack that harassment in a way that is more effective and more strong than the actual harassment, so that you can ultimately create a snowball of power later on, or at least limit the damage to your economy so that you aren't put very far behind because of the harassment. In other words, you want to make the harassment not cost effective for your opponent. So let's take a look at this game. Since this game is Hawk versus Sturm, we are going to be expecting some recons as Sturm, and you can already see this is a day 3 recon. Yeah, day 3 recon from Savagethebeasts, which is what you would expect as Sturm. Sturm recons are very, very strong because Sturm recons do not care about terrain at all. And that really buffs the recon more than any other unit, because recons are delayed by the terrain probably more heavily than any other unit. Recon have 8 movement, and the limitation of the recons is that the terrain kind of slows them down pretty substantially. Going through grass, going through forests takes 2 and 3 moves respectively. But Sturm doesn't care about any of that. Sturm's recons can just motor across the map really, really quickly and reach properties on the other side of the map far quicker than any other CO. And so whenever you're playing against Sturm, you pretty much need to expect that you're going to be seeing recons up in your face, messing with your infantry trying to capture cities very, very early and on many different sides of the map at once. And so generally, if we're following Hawk here, Hawk is going to want to get tanks out as quickly as possible to anticipate the harass and to try and be able to fend off the Sturm recons. Otherwise, Sturm recons are going to slow down the captures of Hawk, and eventually Sturm will capture his side of the map. And if Hawk is delayed enough, Sturm's infantry will be ready to fight on all of the contested properties when Hawk is just trying to capture them. And if the stalemate ends at that point, then Sturm is going to end up having just a lot more income to be able to snowball the rest of the match. So that is the power of Sturm and Sturm's recons. So let's see how Kantbei attempts to deal with the power of these recons. And so we see this is a day 5 tank, and that is the first day that Kantbei could build a tank. And you see that we've already got a recon on the other side of the map on day 6 here for Kantbei, and we even have like a second one up here. So Kantbei is preparing for the harass, and the harass is definitely coming. And already we see the recon blocking this city. And so this is nice use of this tank. If this tank was not here, this infantry would have to go to a blind gap to get to this city, where it would have to move 3, but the infantry can only see 2. So if Kantbei was not as careful there, it would be very easy to walk this infantry and get trapped on the city, and then the recon on the city with Sturm's defense bonus. I mean, you can barely scratch this this recon on the city, even if you have tanks attacking it. So that would really substantially hinder all the properties that this infantry is going to get to. Instead, this infantry is not going to get trapped, and it's on a high defense tile as well. So even if it gets harassed, the damage is not as bad as it could have been. Still, next turn, this recon being there is going to start to delay captures. But if the tank was not there, it would be even worse. And now we see a tank on the other side as well. So Kantbei thinking, okay, I'm definitely going to get harassed on this top side here. And now I need to also cover my captures down here. A classic Sturm tactic is to send early recon top, send early recon bottom. You can't build tanks as fast as Sturm can build recons, and you just have more recons than tanks can kill to overwhelm the tanks, and it guarantees enough damage that ideally Sturm can kind of snowball the game from there. So Kantbei wisely focusing only on tanks, not worrying about vision, and not worrying about really anything else, just trying to get as many captures as possible and to be ready to counterattack any recons that dare to attack the Hawk infantry. And we can see the 2 recons come in already very aggressively. You can see how far on on Hawk's side of the map these recons are to be able to interrupt these captures. But that is what Sturm needs to do, because Sturm, if Sturm does not build that snowball in the early game, then what tends to happen later on is Hawk's CO power and super CO power really take over, and it's kind of a natural counter to Sturm's powers. So Sturm has to have successful harass, otherwise the longer the game goes and if it stalemates out, Hawk is going to kind of be unstoppable and be able to win the game through attrition. And so now, because Hawk was ready for all these attacks, now this damaged infantry can go capture the CO, or can capture the comm tower, which is actually a pretty good place for it, because you don't necessarily need the comm tower right away. And this comm tower is a relatively safe comm tower against anybody but Sturm, really. So this weakened infantry can still get some value by capturing the comm tower even slowly, when maybe it would take like a really long time to capture an actual city, and it would run the likelihood of getting harassed again. Kind of unlucky rolls here for Sturm. I don't know exactly what the math is for whether a recon is going to hit an infantry down to 7 or 6, but got the roll on this square, didn't get the roll here, and having the infantry at 7 is pretty nice. It's going to be very difficult to prevent this capture from going through and having the infantry heal back up. So now, and this positioning forces the Sturm recons onto low defense tiles. So any tank counterattack is going to be relatively strong, because the recons don't have any additional defense beyond what Sturm provides naturally. And you can see it's just more tanks, because Kantbei knows, as Hawk, as long as I don't get totally run over in the early game, my safe defense will get me into the mid game in a relatively even position, and then I'm going to win the rest of the game from there based on the CO powers. So Kantbei has very specific objectives that he's trying to accomplish, because he knows the matchup. And again, we see even more recon harass coming. 1, 2, 3, 4 recons from Sturm and nothing else. And that is what you often see as Sturm, trying to hit all of these frontline infantry just to slow down the captures. And now these infantry up here for Sturm are going to be able to try and get some of these contested cities, because all the attacking units from Kantbei are busy trying to chase down these recons. So there's no time to contest some of these captures that are very vulnerable, because all the tanks need to be busy doing other stuff. But the tanks are doing good work against these recons, and you can see that we've got 2 full recons down here, but there's already 2 tanks. So there's not really a whole lot that I think Sturm can accomplish down in this side. Any attacks of these recons are just going to get the recons pretty much killed. And as we see the first recon go down already. And these recons really haven't done too much damage. They've slowed down some caps, but they haven't really secured a major income lead for Sturm, at least not yet. So you see these recons, they take out the leading infantry here, and Sturm's going to try and get this city and this city. So this would be an income lead if he was able to get both of these. This seems a little bit crazy to me, honestly. Sometimes aggro is a little too aggro. That seems a little bit questionable to me. But you can see the idea here. It's literally nothing but tanks for Sturm, and only now on, it was day 8 for Kantbei. Now Hawk gets first recon. So this is really the core of the safe build. We're getting a lot of tanks. We don't really care about vision so much because the units are gonna the enemy units are gonna come to us. So we don't need to find them. They're coming to us. We want to use tanks to counterattack, and we want to make sure that we don't get overrun with more attacking threats that we can handle. Okay, and you can kind of see the fighting continues, but you can see that the recons are getting kind of overwhelmed and counterattacked, and they're getting some damage on the infantry, but the Hawk tanks are starting to become kind of unchallenged and being able to kind of dominate on the map, and Hawk is able to, while still being down a little bit of income, Hawk is able to at least control the areas of the map that Hawk wants to. So I think we've seen about to day 10 or 11 in this game. I don't really think we need to go any deeper into this replay because we're focused more on the openings here. And once we're into the mid game, well, the opener is done then. The goal of the opener is not to win the game. The goal of the opener is to get into the mid game in a favorable position. And Hawk in this game has definitely taken some damage, but you can see from the unit value here on Kantbei's turn, Kantbei is going to be pretty far ahead in unit value at the end of the turn. Yeah, you can see 81k to 52k at the end. So we're definitely heading into the mid game in a pretty favorable situation, and that's the result of a successful opener. Okay, let's look at another replay using that is going to utilize the safe opener. Okay, and we're back, and we're here on Logarithmic V2, and we have Rip and GrondGrondGrond. And I'm going to change these colors because these colors look very, very similar. In this game, we've got Rip as Drake and GrondGrondGrond as Kindle. So in this matchup, generally speaking, Kindle is the harasser and is going to try and get some early damage done to advance into the mid game without the things becoming super equalized, basically. If the map splits 50-50, generally that is going to be better for the Drake player, and Rip is playing Drake in this case. I believe that this game is relatively old. This was definitely before the Drake air nerf, for what it's worth. I'm kind of curious if Rip would still play Drake on this map with things being the way they are, but that's neither here nor there. So let's take a look at how this one develops. So generally speaking, in Drake versus Kindle, you will see the Drake player opt to go for a safe opener because Drake should be anticipating harass from the Kindle. If Kindle's able to get on the cities like we see here, then that is going to prevent Drake from capping, and also fighting, like chains of fights that are happening on the cities are very good for Kindle, and Kindle can trade infantry much more effectively in the early game as long as Kindle is able to control the cities, because the counterattack damage for whatever's hitting Kindle's unit on a city is going to be buffed due to Kindle's day-to-day bonus. So we see here already the harass is there. I don't know how we see this. Oh, we see it from the mountain. Oh, interesting. So we see this from the mountain. So this is a nice... Honestly, I think this is maybe a little bit of a over-aggression from GrondGrondGrond, not knowing that this recon can be spotted from this mountain. I think what Kindle wanted to do here is trap this infantry. And maybe Kindle is hoping that Drake will be focusing on this pipe seam, because this pipe seam is very important to break down on this map. If you want a full breakdown of this map, I did do a video covering this map in detail, where I talk about all those details. But so maybe Kindle is kind of expecting maybe a more passive opener and trying to get damage done this way. But unfortunately for Kindle, Rip, Johnny on the spot, as always, you wouldn't be wrong to call Rip the best player on the site right now. I don't think anybody would say that's a ridiculous opinion at all. He's got a recon, or sorry, the tank ready to first strike that recon and punish the over-aggression. And sure, this infantry is going to be delayed from getting this city for a turn, but losing half the HP on the recon is pretty rough. And Rip, with a really good understanding of the map, knowing that the most likely target of harass in this map is going to be the comm tower. And actually, check this out. So Rip forgoes going for this city, instead going for this comm tower, because it seems very clear that Kindle wants to maybe lock this comm tower, get this comm tower, lock here, and then fight 2 against 1 in terms of comm towers for the rest of the game. And if Drake does not get that comm tower early, it will be very difficult for Drake to get it later on due to Kindle's CO powers that damage units on cities and whatnot. So Drake is like, nope, I'm going to get that right now because I already got the jump on this recon. And if you want to interrupt this this capture of this really important property, then you're going to have to sacrifice this recon's life to make it happen. This is a really cool play. Like it doesn't seem like much, but the fact Rip is giving up income from capturing this city to go for this comm tower first. It's like a really cool wrinkle, and it shows a lot of understanding of the situation and of the overall strategy of the game and the matchup. And now Kindle's like, nope, actually I'm not willing to give up my only vision on the map because this is being followed up with tanks. But now the window is gone to be able to lock down this comm tower, because now Drake's got it. And so now the objective that Drake wanted, or the objective that Kindle wanted to do, which is to avoid a split map situation, well, now that's going to be incredibly difficult to accomplish that goal, because the only contested properties on the map are just going to be up in this corner, and even these properties are not super contested once this pipe seam is down. So the odds that this map is going to equalize and just be split down the middle is pretty high, and that's going to favor Drake. And we can see that that is exactly what Drake tries to do. No attacking here, no crossing the center line, just focusing on locking down the properties that belong to Drake. So following our fundamental, our level 5, right, of focus on the properties that belong to us. Well, that's what Drake is doing here, just focusing on the properties that belong to us, because Rip knows that that will get us into a mid game that is favorable. And now with the pipe seam broken as well, this area is very securely locked down for Drake. And even managing to get a cheeky interrupt of the city down here. That's pretty. It's kind of lucky. It's not a lucky roll actually, because it's got the comm tower. So that's just a free. That's like a guaranteed interrupt. So that's really cute. Yeah. So and now even Rip with income advantage. So this is a very, very strong opening win for Drake. If we look at the yeah, so two units lost for Kindle, and also a bunch of recon damage taken. This is, even though it feels like it's not that consequential, in the context of the matchup, it is extraordinarily tilted in Drake's favor, based on how this opening's played out. And that's all we're going to look at for that one, because we are safely into the mid game on this map. All right, our third and final replay for this section is Rip versus GetGood on Cover V2. I went through this replay in a lot of detail in another video. So we're just going to be focusing on the opener for this one, and we're not going to spend too much time on the rest of the game. I included this replay because I wanted to show a version of a safe build that also is not necessarily focused on defending against harass, and is actually, if we pull up our our beautiful little image here, is not completely to the bottom left corner, and is instead more between the safe and the aggro sides of the triangle. So like somewhere, kind of halfway between safe and aggro. So it just goes to show that you can have elements of safety in your build and also elements of aggro at the same time, depending on what the map is and depending on what the matchup is. And so this is an example of a build that is both aggro and safe simultaneously. So on cover V2, and in this matchup, the comm towers are very contested. And if you can prevent your opponent from getting the comm tower, then they will be fighting the whole game with 0 comm towers, which is it makes the math very challenging for a lot of attacks. And as Kindle, the Rip playing the aggressor in this game, Kindle is definitely wanting to avoid Drake getting that comm tower. So Kindle is actually going to open up a tank here on day 5, which is the first day that we can get a tank, and is going to aggressively go after the comm tower down in the bottom left. And the idea here is that anything that messes with this capture of the comm tower is going to get counterattacked potentially from a city, from a Kindle tank, which is going to one-shot basically anything. And Drake is not a CO that really wants to contest captures for Kindle, because if you're a recon fighting into an infantry on a city for Kindle, any counterattack is gonna one-shot your recon. Even a recon fighting into a recon. A Kindle recon on a city attacking a Drake recon is going to do a really substantial amount of damage. But you can see the game plan from Kindle here, and this is the turn that everything is really going to happen. It's day 7, and this tank is going to come up here. And because this map is so condensed, this tank actually can get vision of the comm tower to make sure it's safe to actually cap here. And this tank is also ready to counterattack anything that would interfere with its capture. And also these infantry are going to be ready with this recon timing to contest a capture of the opposing comm tower and delay it long enough for this comm tower to be secured, or all the units to front shift over. So it's kind of creating a win-win for Kindle, where either Kindle's going to get this comm tower, or Kindle's going to get a very efficient clear of whatever harasses this comm tower. And then also Kindle creates the opportunity to get this comm tower and then deny this one for the later game. And we see that's exactly what happens. And Drake ends up playing a very, also a very safe opener compared with Kindle. And so you can see that if we bring our triangle back, so Kindle is, well, I can't really draw on top of the image, unfortunately. I don't think I can. Can I do that? No, you can't see that. Okay. Kindle's kind of between aggro and safe, and Drake is all the way in that bottom left corner of safe, with the 2 tanks, and then also an artillery, and then the recon kind of slowly coming over here. So Drake is like prepared for a siege for this comm tower, and Kindle is just really gone for it and locked it down with a lot of speed. So I forgot to, here, I'll replay that turn because I think I had the beautiful triangle on top of the map as I played this turn. But you can see that Kindle puts a lot of game pressure on Drake here and kind of abuses the safety and the passivity that Drake goes for here. So anyway, that's all we're going to talk about from this one. If you want to see the rest of this game, there's a video for that, so go check that out. And now let's move on to the next level. All right, we are on the map Nightmare of Heiankyo, and we are going to be talking about level 7, which is aggro openers. And it wouldn't be fair to talk about aggro openers without our hero Starflash 250. And let's get into the text of the level. So level 7 is, in aggro openers, disrupt your opponent's capture phase with vehicles. Well, seems pretty straightforward. When you're doing aggro builds, the hallmark of a good aggro build is recons that are able to do damage to infantry and help you secure objectives. And so we're on this Nightmare of Heiankyo map, and our CO picks are going to tell us a lot about how the game is going to go, because we have Max versus Olaf. And generally speaking, if you're playing Max in Fog, you are going for an aggro opening of some kind, because more than almost any other matchup, if Max does not end up ahead after the early game and maybe some of the early mid-game tradings, basically once you start getting into superpower territory, if Max is not winning, then there's a good chance that Max is losing. And that's just the nature of Max and the way his powers work, and also the firepower bonus that Max gets on the vehicles that are not artillery. So this is a map that has a lot of very good recon movement. You can see the center area has a lot of connections between all these kind of islands, I suppose, that are connected by shoals, and obviously recons move very quickly across shoals. And so that's going to make aggro more effective on this map due to the extra mobility of those recons. And so normally Olaf versus Max is a pretty tough matchup for Max, but the terrain is pretty favorable, and that's why you see Starflash going for Max on this map. So we'll kind of skip through the first few turns, and we don't even see necessarily a day 3 or a day 4 recon. So instead we see a double day 5 recon. And so I want to encourage you to not merely think about aggro builds as some kind of really early recon purchase that you just kind of throw into the first infantry unit that you see on your opponent's side of the map. Sometimes it's very good to delay the recons a little bit, but then build more so that when your harass actually hits, you hit with more power, and also you sacrifice less income as well from your own capture chains as well, and getting those early infantry out help give you a stable foundation, so that if your recons are able to get some damage done, then you're going to be able to follow that up and be able to support those early recons with a steady flow of other vehicles to support them later on. So we see Neverlocke going for a pretty standard tank opener, and then followed by a recon. So this is a pretty safe opener from Olaf, and this is what we would expect. Olaf going to be anticipating aggro, because it's Olaf against Max, so you expect the recons to be showing up at some point. And on this map, we have these comm towers that are down here and here. So the comm towers are very centralized. And so this is really what Max's objective is on this map, I think, primarily, is to secure Max's comm tower, but also prevent Olaf from getting his comm tower. And if Max is able to fight one comm tower to 0 against Olaf, when we start getting into the vehicle trades, it's really going to be difficult for the tanks of Olaf to stand up to the sheer firepower of Max, and it's going to lead the brawls to tilt very strongly in Max's favor, even if things get developed enough into the game to get into the superpower phase. And so we see like our harassment is going to begin there, but we do see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this tank is going to be in position to attack this infantry on the shoal. But you can see how Starflash is using these 2 recons to spread out the opponent. So now what is this tank going to do? This tank wants to go counterattack this recon, but if he does that, then this entire side of the map is totally locked down by the max recon, and there's no way that Olaf can try to contest what should be Olaf's comm tower. So it's already creating a dilemma because Olaf is not able to cover all the sides of the map. And additionally, if a tank shows up here, Max is already set up to counterattack the counterattacker, right? And if things turn into a tank chain battle in the center of the map, that's going to be really good for Max. Killing that recon, though, I don't know if that was a roll or not. I feel like that might have been a really good roll for Olaf. Because that was like a 90 plus HP recon, and that's a 0 comm tower tank shot from Olaf. So a little bit unlucky for Starflash that attack didn't or that attack didn't leave the recon at 1 HP, because I think if it had, it would have been able to just escape. But regardless, Olaf is not anywhere near being able to take that comm tower, and now there's not really that much that Olaf can do to contest this comm tower for Max. And we see Max is already starting to eat these contested properties here all along the center of the map. This is one of the classic challenges of an aggro build versus a safe build, and that is the safe build doesn't always know where it is safe to fight, because the early recons are going to provide a lot of vision. We've already spotted at least one tank kind of on this northern front, and actually Olaf is very spread out here. We got 2 tanks up here, and then we've got 2 tanks over here, and some in the middle, and then a recon on the front lines. But if Max is able to consolidate his forces on any particular area of the map, Olaf is kind of too spread out to fight that head on. And now Max doesn't really need to focus so much on this corner, because my names are brutal right now. Max has kind of gotten what Max wants out of this corner. Maybe it'd be nice to lock this down, but because Max was able to slow down everything in this corner so deeply, if everything stays the way it is up here, and then Max locks down this corner of the map, that's good enough. And taking this comm tower is going to force Olaf to fight into this position here and aggressively taking cities. Yeah, so like if you're Olaf now, just take a look at this board. Okay, so we have very, very little vision. What side is Max strong on? Is this tank by itself, or are there more tanks backing it up? Or are these units by themselves, or are there more tanks backing it up? The safe opener doesn't really have any way to know, and so that's one of the challenges. You don't really know, like, okay, I should be abandoning this side, or I should be fighting on this side. Because, yeah, this tank is like a little bit exposed, and you can hit it from the city, but if all of the rest of Max's tanks are up here, then you're basically trading a tank away for 1 damage tank on Max's side. And 8 to 5 on a city, it's not that great with fighting without a comm tower. And so Olaf kind of has to hope, like, well, I've hit both of these tanks, but they're only down to 5, and even just 1 tank into 1 tank is not particularly advantageous for the attacker, because the counterattack damage is pretty substantial. And now you're opening the risk of any further max tanks being able to just totally clear off the Olaf tanks. And the positioning of these fights are very, very good. It is very, very difficult for Olaf to remove infantry from cities without having a single comm tower. And on top of that, obviously you're fighting against the higher direct firepower of Max. And you can see like why Max is a popular pick on this map, even against some of the global damage COs. Yeah, so you can see this first engagement, even though Max is the aggressor, in terms of where it happened on the map, this is still right near the middle of the map, and it's kind of even happening on Max's side of the map. So because Max used that early pressure to be able to lock down this corner, he kind of forced Olaf to play a little bit more aggressively down on this side, and that's just really what Max wants. Max wants Olaf to come out and fight Max in the center of the map, and now the terrain advantage is very strong because you can see Max has this property, for this property. When I say this property, I mean he's got a unit on that property, so anything that's going to fight has to attack into those high defense tiles and probably from low defense tiles, which is really even better for Max. So I think we've probably seen enough of this replay, but this is a very quintessential aggro opening from the master of aggro himself. All right, now we're here on Settles as Stillwater v3, and we've got myself against Tordread in a thrilling Drake mirror. And this was actually my first game against Tordread, and this is, I think, one of the first time I kind of played against a new threshold of opponent quality. I don't know how to say that correctly, but this is, I think, probably the best player I had played up to this point, or at least in most of my games. And so let's take a look at this one. This map has never really treated me very kindly, but we're going to see something a little bit different in this opener. So we're going to see what is essentially a greed opener for myself, and we're going to see an aggro opener from Tordread. This is a very good map for aggro openers, and especially as player one, because basically we see the day 3 recon. So I said in the last map that we looked at that not every aggro opener needs to be a day 3 recon, but on some maps, aggro openers do need to be day 3 recon. So again, it's map dependent, but if you're going to go in an aggro build on this map, day 3 recon is a very good way to do it. And this recon is not necessarily about harassing infantry so much as it is disrupting the capture order. Okay, so the recon doesn't always need to like kill infantry to get value. It can force your opponent to go for more safer properties earlier on instead of going straight for more contested properties. It can punish greed if an opponent is going for captures that are not supported by vehicles. Then it's a good way to lock that down. And on this map in particular, there's a little wrinkle where player one can basically prevent captures on this city by going day 3 recon. And so I decided to go a greed opener, and I'm like, okay, Tordread is the king of tanks, so I'm like, well, I don't think Tordread's going to go day 3 recon to try and punish this, so I'm just going to go for the most aggressive capture property, or the most aggressive capture possible, which is this property over here, and I'm going to be walking straight into a day 3 recon opener from Tordread. And so even if I had not gone for this property, it still would have disrupted this opener, because the fact that the day 3 recon exists means that I just cannot get this city. It's not mine to take. And then instead, I'm like, okay, if I'm blocked off here, well, then I'm just going to go aggressively towards this side. And unfortunately, what that means for me is now I'm pretty much locked out of here. And this is something that can happen when you have a successful recon harass on an infantry. You can kind of learn a lot from their build, because you know that if your opponent has a tank in range, it's probably going to counterattack your recon. So if your harassing recon doesn't get counterattacked, it's probably because there's no tank there. And if there's no tank there, there's a good chance it's safe for your recon to hang around. There's some caveats to that. You kind of need to know where the tanks are likely to reinforce from, but the recons have a lot of vision, so it's kind of hard to sneak up on a recon if the recon is there already. So now the recon can just kind of lock down this whole center area. And so especially this property should belong to me as the player on the bottom left. But because that recon is there, and because I'm committing my tanks to this side, and also this recon can see over to here to see if any tanks show up. This is a really dominant position for the recon, where I'm kind of locked out of this whole area. And if I want to not be locked out, I need to put units that are basically in vision of the recon to see, and then the recon can just run away. So this is a really good level of synergy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so you can see that the recon can see to here, and I'm out of vision, but I also can't reach the recon. So I can't reach it. I can't get to any of these squares. So this recon is totally safe and can totally hang out here. So this is one of those features of the map that makes this early recon play very good. If the early harass is successful, you can just stay behind here on this city, and you're never going to be caught off guard. And it really reduces the risk of getting your day 3 recon like immediately killed by a tank, right? And that's always the downside of these very aggressive openings, is that if you kind of get hard countered by your opponent having a tank in the right spot, then you're like really, really far behind. But on this map, that day 3 recon is a lot safer than it would be. All right, we're moving on to another map here, and we have Kilmefirst and Rip going at it, and this is from the I think the Smacky Cup 2 semifinals, something like that. Anyway, this is a new Tier 2 matchup between Von Bolt and Olaf, and again, I've covered this matchup in a lot of detail in the Smacky Cup 3 Round 5 video, where I have a Von Bolt game against an Olaf as well. But if you had to take one thing away from that video in 30 seconds, it would be that Olaf recons are really, really bad against Von Bolt. And so Olaf really needs to invest in tanks to be able to fight against Von Bolt. And so that creates a lot of dilemmas for Olaf in the matchup. So we're going to see how this one plays out. The one thing that Olaf does need, or that Von Bolt does need to accomplish, is to end the capture phase, ideally with some kind of income lead. And in my opinion, the magic number is 4K. It doesn't need to be all accomplished at the end of the capture phase. But if Von Bolt finds himself up by 4K, before the second superpower, that's a pretty solid sign that the game is trending in Von Bolt's direction and is not going to trend in the other direction at all. And so we see in this map here, we have kind of a what I would call this a greed aggro build. And this is something that's very common on this map because it is so large that you really see T-copters almost regardless of what your opening is. just because it adds so much efficiency to getting your units where you need them, and that airport is available right away. So it's just it almost pays for itself by getting you to more properties more quickly, and then it's not sacrificing any unit count. So you're going to see this combination of a recon and a tank, and Von Bolt knows that as long as the recon is on a city, the added defense is going to make it really difficult for Olaf to remove the recon. And anything that attacks the recon, well, we got this tank behind it to counterattack. And as long as all of Von Bolt's units are fighting from the city, it's just incredibly hard for Olaf to get cost-effective trades here. And you can see that Rip can kind of fearlessly put this recon very far forward, even within tank range. And if the worst thing happens is a tank finds this recon, well, all that is going to do is start a chain of trades where Olaf is not on the city and Von Bolt is, and that's not going to generally be good for Olaf in the long run. But kind of unfortunately for Olaf in this situation, this tank does not have vision of the recon and ends up going to try and focus on securing this area down here, not realizing that there's a recon here. So this is one of the benefits of being able to put your recon so far forward. You just get vision of what's going on. And so this tank is hidden in this forest and thinks, oh, I'm very safe down here, and I'm gonna maybe try to lock down these caps down here. But surprise, this tank is still in range to be able to fight here. So I think the idea is maybe Olaf wants to protect against like a recon being in these trees or something like that and coming to fight this infantry. But instead, this tank gets spotted, and now it's real bad. Because now, not only does the comm tower get knocked down, I think this is a bad roll too. Maybe not. I can't remember if you need the comm tower first. There's a chance for it to knock down to 4 instead of 5, but regardless, now this situation is really awful because now not only can the recon hit this comm tower, but it also reveals the tank, and now you get the first shot off on the tank, and it's just now you don't even have the opportunity to counterattack the recon. So Rip really took like the absolute maximum punish possible with this aggro build, and now I mean Olaf is just in a really horrible spot where the tank trading is already going sideways, and now Olaf can't even get the comm tower for a while. Like this infantry can now deny the comm tower potentially. All these cities that are normally pretty safely Olaf's are very, very contested. And now Olaf cannot even contest either of these corners, because all the vehicles have to go over here now. Because if Olaf does not manage to secure this comm tower, it is really horrible. So literally everything just becomes absolutely terrible for Olaf in every way possible, just because Olaf put a first tank here and it got spotted by a recon in a position that Olaf was not expecting. And from there, it's like, skip ahead 3 turns and, Olaf's up, or Von Bolt's up 6K by day 13. So like sometimes aggro openers in the right situation, like you get the right combination of events and things can get really, really bloody really fast. All right, we're back on our old friend Stalingrad here for one last aggro replay. And this is going to be me as Kindle against evocoti as as Olaf. This was just kind of a scrim game that I had done recently to been playing around with Kindle against the Olaf matchup just to see if it's viable or not. But in this game, we're going to be doing a more aggro build, as Kindle against Olaf is going to need to play more aggro. And in this one, we're actually not going to be using a recon. We're going to be using a tank. And this is a little bit specific to the matchup, but the idea is that a Kindle tank on a city is going to be able to one-shot any infantry that are that it's attacking. And also, it's very difficult for Olaf to remove a Kindle tank on a city. You really need at least 2 tanks in the area to remove it. And so I'm going to go for a play where I basically drive up to this city up here. This is kind of a classic city to try and deny, because the infantry that's responsible for this city, as you can see, is going to end up 3 squares away. And so it's not going to have vision of the city before it goes there. So often you'll see players try to bring a recon along just to make sure that nobody sticks a vehicle on that city to prevent the infantry from getting there, because well, it'd be very vulnerable to a counterattack if that were to happen. But we don't actually see that happen in this situation. And so you can see we plop a tank on there. And the reason we do this with a tank instead of the recon is not going to be able... I don't think the recon can one-shot this infantry from the city without a comm tower. I could be wrong off the top of my head. But I think more importantly, this tank, if it's seen, there's still not a whole lot that Olaf can do to this tank other than prepare to get rid of it the next turn. Because it's very unlikely that there's going to be 2 tanks already in position by day 8 to remove a tank in this corner. In fact, it may be impossible depending on the income curve. I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, there's very little bad that can happen to a Kindle tank on a city in the corner for a little bit. So it's a pretty low-risk aggro opener, and it has the ability to deny the city and also potentially... I did the APC aggro thing, or not the APC, the APC opener behind this file. That's pretty cool. Wow, so I did a tank into APC. Oh, that's sick. So this is a greed aggro opener. That's so cool. So we're not like fully aggro here. We are we're opening aggro and then we're doing greed behind it. And that is definitely a thing that you can do. You can open up with like 1 or 2 very aggressive vehicles and then do some greedy stuff behind it, hoping that your early kind of attack will throw your opponent off and kind of distract them long enough for you to be able to accelerate your captures behind it, even though they're vulnerable, hoping that your opponent's vehicles are all off dealing with whatever aggressive threat you've put forth, and that they're not going to be able to fight against you on other parts of the map. And that can be an option on larger maps to go for something like that. But anyway, so the infantry bonks into the tank because there's no vision, and then it gets removed. And then this sets up really nicely because now I'm able to take this whole corner pretty safely. And the follow-up infantry that was supposed to take this city, or the next infantry is like over here. So it's another like 2 turns away. So I've denied this capture for a number of turns and removed infantry, and also risked very little in the process, because if that infantry does not actually move on to the city, well, then I'm pretty sure that there's vision of my tank there, so I can kind of know that there's a recon in that corner. So kind of a low risk, medium reward, and then we're being really efficient behind it. So I think this is a really nice aggro option on this map, and one of a couple different options that you can go for that is kind of I guess a hybrid between the aggro and the greed options here. So I think that's going to cover it for level 7. Let us move on to level 8. All right, we're back on Stalingrad with a very familiar game. I think I mentioned this one in the last section. This is going to be myself against Fyram. This is the Von Bolt versus Olaf game. And we're doing level 8. This is use vision from aggro openers to reveal your opponent's strong and weak sides. So aggro openers don't merely need to create damage in the capture phase. There's more to aggro openers than just that. And in order to understand the value of this, we kind of need to talk about strong sides and weak sides. So let's get this text off the screen. There's two different ways to think about strong sides and weak sides. Traditionally, strong sides are a front of the map where you have more strength. Now, that's not very helpful of a definition, but oftentimes what this means in practice is that the fronts will be divided sometimes by oceans or rivers or things like that that kind of force units to go into a certain direction. And this map, you kind of have a soft divider, which is this little pipe here, which kind of forces this base to go this way and these bases to go this way. But it's not too crazy to send this base up this way as well. But I guess by default, this direction ends up being the strong side of the map for player 2, and the opposite for player 1 as well. And so that is kind of the strong side of the map. But there's also strong side in the sense of just the front that you're prioritizing at any given time. And so no matter what the map wants you to do, you can kind of choose to send your units wherever you want to. It may not be the most efficient place to send your units, but if you send them there and you send most of your units there, then kind of wherever you've sent your units, that kind of becomes your strong side, regardless of what the map thinks. And so oftentimes in Fog, especially at the higher levels, players tend to keep a lot of their forces clumped together. After all, having all of your forces together reduces a lot of the risk of what you can't see, because if all of your stuff is together in one place, it's nothing else has happened, like no fighting or anything like that, it's kind of impossible for your opponent to have more stuff in a place than you, because either they've got the same amount of stuff, which would be like all their stuff in that area, or they have less stuff because they split some of their stuff to one side and some of the stuff to the other side, but you've got all your stuff on that side. So that means that you're going to be in a good shape when it comes to a fight, even without knowing anything about what they have. So it's a very common tactic to kind of reduce risk by keeping all of your units on a certain side. But one of the challenges of Fog is that in maps like this is that you could really send like all of your stuff to either side of the map. It's not crazy for all the vehicles to be built out of these two bases and then airport support to be sent this way. And then this base is just infantry. In which case, almost everything is going to be down here. But it's also very possible for these two bases to be vehicles and airport support sent this way. In which case, this base would be an infantry base. It's not a substantial difference in efficiency to do it that way either. So it becomes very important in Fog to know what decisions your opponent is making about which side they are prioritizing reinforcing with the majority of their units, so that you can know whether it is a good idea to fight or not. The idea is that if you have a advantage on one side, you will want to attack on that side, and then also on the other side you want to retreat, because you want to minimize your infantry losses on the side where you're weak, because you can't really defend against the vehicles. If your opponent attacks in with all their vehicles and you only have infantry there, well, it's not going to go well for your infantry. So best to try and preserve them as much as possible by pulling them back and buying time, maybe counterattacking to delay captures on your properties to either capture stuff faster on the other side of the map, or give your units time to reinforce from the other side and shift over to try and catch your opponent being overextended and too greedy. But in order to do that well, you need to know how your opponent has made choices about where they've sent their stuff. And so one of the advantages of aggro openers is you tend to have recons at the front of the map, and you're able to see a lot of stuff. And so getting that information is going to help you understand how your opponent is allocating their army. And so in this game, there's, as you likely know if you've been following this channel, there's a very long video going into detail about all the aspects of this opener. But the opener that I've gone here is aggro because I have not built any sort of transports. It's been all units. But this aggro opener is not necessarily about disrupting my opponent's capture phase. After all, I've let them get this corner property for free, and I haven't done any sort of disruption on really any captures yet. This is more set up as a kind of early mid-game attack aggro build. And so the early recons, well, they weren't particularly early by any sense, but they were the first vehicles. Those recons are there to figure out how safe it is and how far I can extend my vehicles while getting a lot of damage done and also being safe. And so you can see the specific analysis that I made about how safe I was in that video. I break it down in painful detail. But the important thing is that these recons, they didn't attack anything until this turn, day 10, where the capture phase is almost over. But they gave me really critical information about how my opponent had opened and where it was likely that the forces were distributed, which gave me the information to let me know that it was safe to make a major commitment of vehicles pretty far on my opponent's side of the map and to get value here. And then the downstream of that was that I was able to lock a lot of this portion of the map off from my opponent, which then turned into an income lead. But it didn't involve any recon harass. And so that's really the distinction between level 7 and level 8. Not all aggro builds need to incorporate recon harass. Sometimes the recons can just be there to set up for informed mid-game aggression. It's not the same thing as mid-game yeeting. The difference between a yeet and an attack is information and vision of what you're attacking into. A yeet is blind, and you're just throwing stuff at your enemy, hoping, I hope that there's nothing there, or I hope my enemy is not strong enough to defeat this attack. But a proper attack is using the information you have about the map and targeting somewhere where you think is stronger and that they're not going to be able to counterattack. And sure, it's possible for you to be wrong, and those are good opportunities to learn about kind of your thought process and whether you made any mistakes in understanding the game situation. But these are calculated moves that you ought to be making in your attacks to be able to go onto your opponent's side of the map, maybe briefly, opportunistically, but successfully and based on information. And the only way you're going to get that information is by having recons kind of close to the front. So we're back here on this Stitch Monster. Yeah, Stitch Monster is the name of this map. And we are with Starflash and Neverlocke again. I don't know why these two play each other, or for some reason their games end up being really good for analysis for some reason. But anyway, they're playing again, and we're going to take a look at this build. We've got Kindle versus Drake again, so Kindle generally the aggressor in this matchup, and we see a kind of a double recon opening from Starflash, which is, I think, kind of Starflash's go-to opening on this map. Although this game, I think, is a little bit old. Maybe it's not the go-to opening anymore, but it kind of takes a while for the recons to get over to the other side of the map. But on the other side, Neverlocke going for a very, I I guess, a very safe opening, and also a little bit greedy because this early artillery is meant to bust down this pipe, which is a pretty important pipe to bust down. It opens up this side of the map to use kind of like these two bases to reinforce this way very quickly. So you see the pipes broken very early on this map, but obviously the challenge of the pipe seams is if you break them too early, you kind of give your opponent information that you're very vulnerable. And so Starflash is set up with a bunch of recons very early to try and exploit this potential vulnerability. Let's see, Neverlocke did not attack the pipe this turn. So, but still, this it's very slow to get tanks out on the map, and this recon already sees this infantry kind of overstepping. Like this is almost like almost like a greed capture here by Neverlocke, and so that's almost like a freebie. Like surely this is going to get massacred by this recon and infantry. Unfortunately, it looks like Starflash is a little bit unlucky here. Got this greedy infantry got it busted by the Drake infantry that had already finished capping the city. But so not great on this side, but this side is going great. That infantry just dies for nothing. And now Kindle is going to be really strong on that side of the map. So let's kind of speed things up. And see how things develop here. So there has been a little bit of early brawling, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of harass here. Like these recons are fairly well established, and the recons, I mean, they weren't like crazy going on to Drake's side of the map. They are pretty much just locking down the contested properties opportunistically and not really focused on denying captures, which is a good way to play recons. And this is the punish of the greed build, right? That we talked about in our image, where we have the aggro builds doing well against the greed builds. Don't love this, but this is the power of the early recons, right? Like, so this recon saw this tank go into the forest here. Don't really love giving that information away for free. We broken down this? Okay, so this pipe seam is dead next turn. Is another advantage of Kindle in this map, putting this artillery on the city. It's going to break down the pipe seam one shot faster. But we can already see, like, the recons have kind of done their job. Like, this recon is not even bothering to stick around in here because we already see the tank here with the vision. So it seems very likely, based on what we've seen so far, that Drake is going to be prioritizing this avenue of attack. And this recon is not really harassing. He's just checking out to see if any vehicles come down through this way. Because if any attempt is made to do an attack down here, it's going to involve copters coming down this way, which we got the recon has vision of, and also the closest land reinforced route from the bases up here goes through these shoals, which now this has vision of as well. So now this recon, it's not harassing, it's just gaining knowledge that, okay, we haven't seen any vehicles come down here, therefore all the vehicles must be going this way. This way is the strong side for Drake based on the vision that we have. So now, where are we going to reinforce as Kindle? We're going to pull a lot of stuff up here and have a lot of tanks ready to fight. And so we see the infantry kind of, go down here, and there's like this copter that is kind of split pushing. So we know that there's no anti-air down here. If the anti-air was down there, we would have seen it with the recon. And the recon is bouncing between these two cities so that we can see if any shift is happening on this other weak side. But as long as there's no shift happening, then this copter is basically going to be unstoppable. And there doesn't need to be anything more than this copter down here to maintain superiority over this front. Everything else can be sent up here to receive an attack. And we kind of shift this along a little bit, but you can see the idea here of we see one tank show up, so got to play a little bit more cautious, but Kindle's still stronger here. And now the fight, the majority of the reinforcements, like look at this, look at this chain of reinforcers heading up this way, and a lot of vehicles. So Starflash using that vision, knowing that this is where the threat is, and meeting the threat with the majority of the reinforcements. So the vision from the early aggro, sure, the recons did get some damage done that was good, but what really was decisive later on in this game is just knowing, okay, this strong side is over here, and so if we kind of have an even clash, then the income advantage from the rest of the board is going to pile up, and even if no more cities change hands, things are going to snowball in my favor. All right, this last map that we're going to talk about is Chosen Reservoir. This is another really classic map. It's a great map. I think it's probably in the Hall of Fame, and if not, it ought to be. And this is myself against Xie, which is a Chinese player, is very, very strong. Very, very strong player. It's a Jake against Jess. And in this map, I'm going to be going for a weak side recon here. And this is really more than anything else an aggro / safe build. And so this is almost like an anti-greed build. We're kind of building this recon because we want to just defend against anything silly that our opponent is trying to pull, and also to try and know if we're going to get harassed on this weak side here. So in a situation like this, the recon by itself is not really enough to do more than get information and maybe stop some greedy captures, because you need more than a single recon to really shut down a front. And you can see here that we sent one recon here and one tank to the other side, so we're being pretty safe overall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we see the T-copter. And we have our aggro build has run directly into the face of a greed build. And I don't know if you've been watching too carefully what's been happening on Xie's side of the map, but this is a double T-copter base skip opening. So this is pretty wild. This is really as greedy as you can get. This capture is completely unsupported and basically relying 100% on there being nothing to interrupt it. But unfortunately, there is something to interrupt it, and that is my recon, which is able to get into that corner. And this recon really provides crucial information, because I can see by the positioning of this T-copter that it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he's gonna basically try and steal my my city up there in the corner. But knowing that is happening is actually really critical, because that means that this turn I can prepare to deal with that and get a copter. So that early information, I mean, it would have been, imagine, going tank first on this side. I would have given up this port and also given up the city. and then I wouldn't have been building a copter and sending it in that direction for like a number of turns later on, and maybe even Xie would have been able to steal even more than that one city in the corner. So this recon gives me really critical information, and I'm able to harass that infantry. And this is going to set up for the rest of the engagements that happen, as I kind of do a greedy play here, and I know that my opponent is really low on infantry on this front, because we had an infantry go over here to my corner city. So I basically, I don't know how to explain this very easily, but basically the idea is I want to do as much damage as I can to the infantry on this front to try and punish the greed of removing an infantry to go to that corner. And so, I mean, I thought it was pretty likely that the tank could be here. But if the tank wasn't here, then this is really, really good. And even denying this this port is already very good. And now I have a very good idea of the layout of my opponent, because I see, okay, this is early, really early T-copter into early tank, which means that I'm pretty free down here, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot coming behind it. So I'm likely to, if we kind of skip ahead here. So I lose the recon, but this infantry survives. And so the fact that nothing hits this infantry means that there's no other vehicles as well. So now I'm pretty free to choose this top side here as my strong side, because I have a very good idea of my opponent's strength and his allocation of units to this front. I'm not going to go too much further into this game. This is a really good game. Recommend pulling this one from the replay archive if you want to see more. I'm trying to get to where the brawling starts to happen. But that early recon gave me a lot of value, and also kind of led to the situation where I feel confident enough that I can engage this tank that went into the woods here and take what is kind of a very aggressive infantry engagement here. Like, I'm really going quite heavy with the infantry fight. Even though, like, I literally have like a recon and a tank here, right? Like, it's not a huge amount of units supporting this push. But I feel like I have really good information that, okay, this is now my opponent's strong side based on the positioning, and now this is like the weak side, and my opponent's game plan is like to try and get some of this and maybe get this corner and then force me to fight on this side, and we disrupted everything because we saw it very early. So a good example of a kind of hybrid safe aggro combo, and a crazy greed opener by my opponent too, which it's a really sick opener. All right, well, it seems like I've lied again, and I promised you 5 levels in this video, and I'm only delivering 3, because this one is going on for nearly an hour and a half, and my voice is not going to be able to hold up long enough to, I think, record the last 2 levels tonight. So we're going to separate that out into a third video, I guess, and we'll cover the last 2 levels of this set of 10 in that video. So thanks everybody for sticking out so far. I hope that this way of thinking about openers is helpful for you, and breaking it down to these kind of concrete categories helps you be a little bit more deliberate in your choices of how to choose what you're trying to do. I think it's very important to have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and then see how you actually do against what your original plan is in terms of execution. And this will give you something to aim for. We haven't really talked too much about choosing what type of opener to go for. We've more talked about their characteristics, but we'll have to wait on that, see if there's maybe more to be explained in the future. But for now, I hope you have a good idea of the fundamentals of good safe openers and good aggro openers. You should know that safe openers are not merely just about covering every single capture that you are going to do with tanks, but it's about protecting your important areas of the map, protecting those contested captures. And for aggro openings, it's not just about building a recon as soon as you have the money to do so, but it's about denying particular lines of capture of your opponent, getting information, putting yourself in a winning position for your mid game, and also disrupting what your opponent's plans are, and giving yourself opportunities with the information that you have from that extra vision. So, hope this was helpful, and we'll see you, I guess, for a third video in this series. Until next time, it's been Elagatua, and I'll see you then.